translation will be available. So when we open up to Q&A at the end, if people want to ask questions in Gymraeg or in English, we're able to take questions in both languages. So mae croeso mawr I chi.
So you're most welcome to ask questions in either Welsh or in English, and we'll do our best to respond to them.
Thank you all for coming here this morning. It's a real privilege for us all, really, to be sat here in the heart of democracy in Wales, celebrating 20 years of devolution. I think one of the things that struck me about this project has been the chance, really, to tell new stories, to discover stories about Wales and to tell those new stories. And I think that chimes a lot with what devolution is about. Devolution, really, and the setting up of the National Assembly was a chance, really, for Wales to tell its own story and to forge a new story for itself. A lot of that happens in here in words and discussions, dare I say, perhaps not as heated and as out of control as they've been in other capitals across the UK this week. But you know, those discussions happen in words. But it's lovely to be here today with these artists who have created discussion. I hope will generate discussion through the images that they have created as part of this exhibition. As I said, this exhibition is a project, a joint project between the National Assembly and Ffotogallery, and it was opened as an open call, and large numbers of artists have put forward submissions, and Alice and David, who are the joint curators on this project, sifted through it. I think had discussions, and we settled on these. Well, actually, I'm a bit confused now. These 6 artists, but actually one is missing. So John is not here today. Luce and Harry have worked as a collaborative team on this. So there are 6 individual artists or groups of artists who've worked on this project. So we're delighted to be here this morning, telling new stories about Wales. And I think one of the things that struck me from looking and seeing these images was really discovering things about Wales that I didn't know, that was making me think about different aspects of Wales in different ways. And it touches on lots of, it touches on our hopes, it touches on our ambitions, it touches on some of the challenges that we face, it touches on ideas of immigration and emigration and the way Wales has both welcomed people here and the way people from Wales have gone out around the world and made their homes across the globe. It touches on generational change, it touches on, I was particularly struck by some of the images of the young Assembly members and some of the energy that comes from them and hopefully what they will bring to the future of Wales. So there are lots of different things in there, and I'm sure every single one of you, if you've had the chance to look at the images, will take different things from the images we see here. So shortly, I'm going to open up to the artists to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their stories, and then we'll have a Q&A. The Q&A will be open to everyone who's down here. If there are people in the galleries upstairs and people who are joining us, I can't see. I can't quite read that. Sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming today. My name is Kai Phillips and I'm a member of the Welsh Youth Parliament for Carmarthen and South Pembrokeshire. In a moment I'll be having a conversation with successful artists who've contributed their time and enthusiasm to create images that show their aspirations and hopes for the future of Wales. As you see in the gallery of the Senedd above us there, the exhibition is called A Number of Voices, One Nation. I'd like to say it's well worth seeing. I've had the opportunity of having the incredible opportunity of John Poultney to take a photograph of myself and the members of the Youth Parliament at 2 regional meetings. They're excellent images, and reflects all of us. And if you look for me in the exhibition, I live on a dairy farm, so I'm actually holding a glass bottle of milk. This morning's event is in partnership with Ffotogallery, and now I hand over to Matthew Talvan, the chair of Ffotogallery. Thank you, Matthew. Sorry about that. Thank you, Kai. Big apologies. I hadn't understood that Kai was going to welcome you. Kai is an example of one of the people who's portrayed in the exhibition, and the confidence that Kai shows bodes very well for our future. So thank you very much, Kai.
My apologies for not introducing Kai at the beginning, but it's great to see a member of the Young Assembly here. Kai will be very pleased to know that I have my milk delivered in bottles. So that picture of someone holding the bottle resonated with me. So we will be opening up to questions afterwards, and likewise I can see the people who are joining upstairs. If people upstairs have questions, then I understand there are some pens and papers upstairs, and they're able to write them down, and we'll have a super fast usher to sort of bring them down to us and introduce them. So, without further ado, we have 6 of the artists here this morning. We have Edward Bryden, we have Lucian Harry, James Hudson, Hugh Alden Davis and Zilla Bowes, who've all worked on different projects here. And I'm going to ask them really just to give us a few minutes background to their project. And we'll start here with Edward.
Thank you, Matthew. Good morning, bore da, diolch yn fawr. So my project is called The Singing Hills, which is a reference to a book written by an American in the 70s about life in central New York. And it's also a reference to the fact that singing is so much still a part of life in Wales, in North Wales, especially where I'm from, and over in central New York and Vermont. And the reason I came to this project was in 2003, I left and I went to New York for work, and I was searching for home over there. And it took me a long time, but eventually through social media, I found out about this community in central New York near Remsen in Oneida County that is, has many people descended from people of North Wales. My wife and I and our children were driving around the area, and we came across churches and cemeteries filled with the names of people who were born in places like Pwllheli or Carnarvon and places around Snowdonia, and who died and who lived and died in North Wales, and their descendants are living there still. And that sort of really struck a chord with me, being an immigrant myself. And so I went away for a year, and I thought about it, and I felt that there was something there, especially if these people had relatives back here in Wales. And so I started to contact them, and over the course of the next year, and then onwards from then, so 2016 through to now, I started visiting the area regularly from where we lived in New York City and then Westchester up to that area. It's about the same distance as going from Cardiff to Anglesey, actually, about a 4-hour drive. And I started talking to people, learning about their life history, their family history, why their families left Wales due to the pressure of work, poverty, not being able to find work in the slate mines, the pressure of people's Welsh heritage being suppressed at the time during the Victorian government. And with that, I started to think it would be a great way to link these people back to Wales by taking their portrait and then taking their portrait of their relatives back in Wales. So that's what I started doing. And then in the course of going up there, I started to notice just how similar the landscape was as well. And Anglesey, very much a sort of rolling hills, rocky soil, that kind of thing, is very similar to central New York. Both areas are very much primed on an agricultural work and land. In central New York, it's dairy farming. In Anglesey, a lot more sheep farming, but also dairy as well. And then on the border of New York, there's an area that borders Vermont called the Slate Valley. And obviously, coming from New York, when you have the slate, coming from North Wales, when you have the slate, and then to see it in Vermont, I felt, well, I had to photograph that area as well. And I was able to get in touch with St. David's societies in both central New York and in the Pulteney area of Vermont, and I made contacts with the people there. So the project I've done is really about linking people and place in Wales with people in place in America, but I think that speaks in a sort of a specific but universal way to people in place elsewhere around the rest of the world. Many of us know about the Welsh in Patagonia, but don't necessarily know much about the Welsh who've emigrated elsewhere and why they went there. So that's why I felt this project was important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. Luce and Harry.
Okay, bore da, everyone. Mine and Harry's project, we started the project in light of my grandfather's death and the current refugee crisis. The project we were aiming to make, which we think we've successfully done, is a tale of two stories. The first story is about my own personal heritage, and in the 1956 uprising of Hungary, my grandfather left to travel. He left to escape the violence and ended up somehow in Pontypridd alongside 96 other Hungarians, where he subsequently made a life and basically found his feet here, found a wife, found a family. And the story is partly about that and about the fleeing of such terrible circumstances to come here and the life that he made. The second part of the story is about the Eritreans and the current Eritrean crisis, where people are leaving Eritrea due to their oppressive government, which is similar circumstances to the Hungarian government at the same time.
Yeah, so Luce has kind of covered it there. So I suppose the reason we wanted to make the project was to kind of tell a positive story of a movement of people into Wales who have had a kind of positive impact on the society and have kind of come to see themselves as Welsh. And that's a kind of historic story. And then we wanted to pair it with something contemporary and sort of show how the face of Wales is kind of changing and is, I suppose, what it's going to look like in another 40, 50 years.
And we wanted to do this by using a mixture of archive and current imagery as well. So throughout the project, what was so wonderful was going through all of the different old newspapers which tracked the journeys that these people went on and how Wales actually reacted to it. And the one thing that we've really got out of it was that Wales is just a welcoming place. So we've tried to show that in our work.
Fascinating. I mean, these Edward's project and yours, I mean, there are echoes through them both in terms of that sense of the way people move. We move around, and actually that can be a positive thing. And there's a lot to be drawn from that. Thank you very much. James.
My name's James Hudson. About a week before I found out about the open call, I was listening to a Radio 4 programme about the original Parliament building up in Machynlleth, which was established in the sort of early 1400s, and I didn't know a lot about this before, so that was kind of on my radar, I suppose. And then I came across the open call, and I was thinking about how I could possibly link, the historical Parliament with this one here. And then I got a bit sidetracked, and then I thought, how about a piece of fiction about an off-road cycle journey from Machynlleth to Cardiff, Anyway, it started out as quite a sort of wild proposal, and I couldn't really understand how I was actually going to do it, but then worked it down and sent it in, and they liked it, and that's exactly what I did. I didn't do the whole journey in one go. I did it in several stages. I met a lot of welcoming people on the way. I agree with what's been said. I photographed things I saw, and then I basically made the rest up and produced a piece of work which is a mixture of text and images. And the purpose of the work is twofold, really, is to remind people about the original Parliament building and the history of devolution, and also to tell people about what a brilliant country it is to go off-road cycling in. And this is not just me as somebody with a history interest in cycling. You know, the Welsh Parliament has already is actively promoting this as something to do. So and that's what I did. I mean, it's a book and an exhibition. And, yeah, you can go and have a look at it.
Thank you, James. Hugh.
Right, okay. Listening to that and sort of from what I've read, everybody's kind of moving out and looking at Wales from a distance and coming back in and comparing those. I kind of move in. I look at it from a sort of microcosm sort of perspective. So instead of sort of reaching out, I'm reaching in. And in this case, I'm reaching backwards in time. So much of my work is based on a village that I live in. And looking at that and how it's changed since I was a kid. So this project itself, Zennial, looks at a micro-generation in this case, based in the 80s, which apparently Zennials are born between 1977 and 1984, I think, or 85. I think there's a 7-year gap. So I started looking at Wales in that sense, or Tumble, or the Gwyndraeth Valley. You know, the Gwyndraeth Valley is very little recorded over the years. And I feel it's kind of my duty to sort of bridge those gaps. So all my work at the moment is about sort of bridging the things that don't exist, making a Wales sort of seen rather than disappearing into the archives or into people's drawers. Or it's just facilitating that history that disappears. And I thought if nobody's going to document my village and archive it, then nobody ever will, and then it'll just disappear. So that's what my work's about.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Angela.
Bore da, diolch yn fawr.
Good morning, thank you.
Thanks, guys. So, upstairs in this wonderful building, I have 7 portraits of farming families, people, from a remote farming community in Mid Wales, which I did in moonlight. And I think I was thinking about how to introduce these portraits. And I think the thing about this work is it comes from 2 of my interests, and it's very organic. So it's probably most useful if I just describe how I ended up doing portraits of farmers in moonlight and keeping them up very late, which you shouldn't do with farmers, because they get up very early. So the first thing is that I had an ongoing interest in darkness. So I did I'm also a writer and a filmmaker, and I did a poetry sort of writing residency in Scotland, where I spent the entire time writing about inner darkness, and it was very interesting, and I came up with a lot of fascinating insights into myself. And then I did a residency as an artist, as a visual artist and a writer, in the Slate Valley in Mid Wales, which is sort of near Rhayader. And that was with the Arts Council of Wales. And my proposal was to carry on my exploration of darkness, but looking outside of myself at other things. And the Slate Valley is an international dark sky park, as well as being, a sort of farming area. And you can stand there in moonlight and see everything. And what I realized really quickly was that darkness isn't really dark. It's just if it's lit, or if there's no artificial light, it's another space. And so I started to write about darkness, and I started to meet lots of people who were doing things in the dark, including all the farmers. And I'd go and talk to them in the dark about the dark and record them. And while I was doing this, I realized that their stories and their lives were so interesting. I was also trying to photograph the dark and trying to capture this idea that darkness isn't dark. So how do you show that? Because a lot of photography in the dark seems to be making it really light. So how do you show the dark as dark, but also light? So I did loads of tests, and then one of my sort of breakthrough tests was photographing, he's nearly 90, a farmer called Cliff from a farm called Batalog, who's retired now, in the dark. And it was so extraordinary, this process of capturing him with sheep in the background, in the dark, in moonlight, that I thought, no, this is this is the project. This is interesting. And in that time, for quite a long time, I've been also for my own photography, which will be next year. I'll have my own show. I'm exploring the lives of the farming community there. So the farmers in this community, in the Elan and Clewin valleys in Radnorshire, they still gather sheep on the open hill. They're tenanted because the land is managed by a trust, because a lot of the land up there was flooded to make reservoirs for water to go to Birmingham in England. So the farmers there, they still come together to bring the sheep down from the hill. And this means that they have a very strong community, and it's very rare, I think, and they still use horses to gather their sheep. So I was encouraged by them to photograph them. I'm a writer, I'm a filmmaker, I'm not sure I really can do this. And they encouraged me, and they kept me coming back. And so in that process, I got to know so many people, and I started to try and photograph as many of the farmers who I got to know as possible in Moonlight. And so I have a huge amount now of portraits, of which 7 up there are the ones that I chose to sort of provide for this show. But I'm going to extend the work now. And I feel like that community it's about community, my project, in the end, even though they're isolated portraits of people in Moonlight, because this community is about to change. So in Wales, I think we think of the rural landscape as being sort of farmed, and I think we think of hill farming and sheep farming as part of the identity of Wales so much that people maybe don't question it. And I think what is important about photographing people in the land of which they are the custodians now is that life and that land is going to change. No one knows how it's going to change. There are lots of discussions about climate crisis, Brexit, tariffs, no deal, these kind of things and farmers right now are not always the most politically, friendly sort of people, because there's so much talk of the kind of damage that may or may not be doing to the environment. I'm not sure. It can be quite a divisive argument. Yeah. So, but fundamentally, they are the custodians of the land there, and I think putting them in the land in Moonlight shows the kind of what I would say was liminality, the sort of transition that they're going through, and that's what I did.
Fantastic. I mean, I have to say, all of these stories. As I said earlier, when I looked at these, I felt I was learning something new about Wales in every single one of them, and I think that's a very powerful tool. It allows you to focus on one particular story, and it's lovely to hear from you all what the inspiration was behind that. Are there any questions from the audience? You've got something burning question you'd like to ask about the project, about any one of the images? If you just want to put your hand up, we do have some roving mics going around. But while you're thinking about that, one of the things that I was really interested in is what, if anything, did you feel you learnt about Wales whilst doing this project? Was there anything unexpected or anything that's sort of left an impression on you?
For me personally, it was so shocking and a wonderful shock to find how many charities are out there working to help support people in Wales, and the general, generally the way that people are so open to helping people and setting up organisations, and I don't know, just all of the places we visited throughout our project. We met up with loads of different refugee organisations that are working with people now in Cardiff and Newport, and just the amount of work and effort that they are putting in. I just found it so shocking, because when you compare it to the way the media often portrays the refugee crisis, it was quite nice to know that there are all these people that are just working hard to make Wales the nation of sanctuary, I think they're calling it. And I think they're doing a great job. So that's great. But another thing that we learned as well was that in the past, this was also the case as well. For the Hungarians that came over, there were many relief funds out there to help them settle. and different centres for them to come in and to basically have a home. And it was wonderful to learn that.
That's really good to hear. I mean, you hear a lot about, people talk about Wales, about this nation that offers a warm Welsh welcome, but that's that's it in practice, in a very practical way in responding to, I suppose, to global situations. Any other thoughts on?
I mean, I could just echo a little bit of what I said. I think I learnt that the power of community to, absorb difference, maybe. So in a lot of these farmers, people say, oh, they all voted for Brexit. That's the kind of narrative. But what I find was that you had couples where one voted Remain, one voted Leave, and neighbours who voted differently. And it doesn't seem to be an issue there because the community requires them to work together. And I felt the power of people coming together in common purpose and the potential for the loss of that in general, not necessarily in the farming community, but just in general, and that where we have that in Wales, we should really honour it and be grateful for it.
Yeah. Sort of relate to that. I think looking at sort of the smaller community, or looking at one particular community over the last 10 years or so, you kind of, you see things changing. People go, oh, it's a small village, or nothing changes here, but it does. And I'm seeing it all the time, and that's what I'm photographing. I'm seeing the whole infrastructure being taken away. Everything that made that community work is all gone. There's nothing there. Once, it survived on a mining community, something I never even saw. But it was left with factories, it was left with bus companies. All these things have now gone. There's nothing left. However, some of these projects that I'm looking at, you kind of hear this, that people are going to be against each other and nobody sort of works together anymore. But I've had the opportunity to do 2 projects now as a community project, this being one of them, Zenio, and another one called Ffotogallery, or the Carnival Project, where a few of us have gone in there, and you should see the way the community pulls together. It's absolutely amazing. And we're apparently living in the sort of neoliberalist state where nobody cares about anybody but themselves. It's so not true. You see this so strong in community in Wales right now, more than you've ever seen it. So yeah, that kind of...
I'll echo that as well. Over in New York, it was the same. I don't think I've had anyone who was reluctant to be part of this project, and they would then pass you on to someone else to say, hey, have you met this person? You should talk to them. So the welcoming nature both here and people in Welsh heritage elsewhere is amazing. But of course, from what I learnt was the reach of Wales is far bigger than we probably realise. I touched on saying that Patagonia is something, the Welsh colony in Patagonia is something we probably know about. But I was in New York for sort of 13 years before it, right under my nose, was sort of revealed to me that there was this Welsh influence. And it just that deep dive straight into it. I mean, it was under my nose. You've got places called Bethesda in Maryland, Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, the Welsh Quaker tract from Philadelphia onwards through there. There are Welsh communities in Nebraska, in Idaho, in Wisconsin, in Michigan. And there's a Welsh Museum of Heritage in Nebraska, or North Dakota, I think it is. So they really did spread far and wide, and that's probably the other side of the world too, to Australia and New Zealand. And so the reach is far bigger than we realise, and I think in this current climate and as we move forward, perhaps that is something that Wales can capitalise on in a more globalised world where we can talk to each other more easily through social media, through other mechanisms of communication and that kind of thing, and bring that welcoming nature of the community into a wider spectrum.
And how did people respond to you as photographers, as people doing this project, jointly with the National Assembly? Did that create discussion? Did it create interest? Did it create a response in any way?
I think for us it definitely helped having the backing, because it was kind of, you were taken more seriously, and it was the idea that this was going to end up in this building kind of, I suppose it showed that you guys, or the government, kind of care enough about the issue to kind of put it in this building. So yeah, and obviously it provokes interesting conversations.
Yeah, my experience, I think if you say I'm on a publicly funded project and you're meeting them on the top of the hill, and it's a sunny day, you might get a certain response. But a lot of the people I met was, I was with a standard kind of road bike on a hill, and there was a lot of rain and wind.
It doesn't rain in Wales.
Sort of saying, well, why are you here? And then when you explain that this is a project that celebrates 20 years of devolution, then things changed. And that's when I got I'm not saying I got a negative response, but then you get a real engagement and a much more positive. Oh yes, this is a good thing to celebrate. This requires a bit more of a wider view, than just having a birthday cake. we need a much kind of a wider cultural response to this, which I think we've certainly. Yeah, I see it upstairs just within photography, and obviously there's a lot of other events. But yeah, all the responses I got were entirely positive towards this being a worthwhile thing to do.
I think there's a certain sense of validation, and I'm not talking about for myself, I'm talking about for the people that I've been photographing. And validation's probably not the right word. They want to be able to reach back towards Wales. And they're celebrating their own heritage over in America, in the case of my project, but they want to be able to reach back and feel like they have a voice here and influence here. And, one of the reasons is things like in Remsen, New York, they have a beautiful stone church, Welsh chapel. And 2 years ago, there was a mold problem there. And yet, they need some source or some people to help them store this stuff. They've got Welsh Bibles, Welsh hymn books, clogs, Welsh clothing that all came over with people in the 1800s and 1900s that is in danger of being lost, and that's a valuable archive, and so they need help. Then you have Green Mountain College in Pulteney, Vermont, which has just closed down, and they had a whole room dedicated to Welsh heritage because of the people who moved over into that area to Pulteney, who were slate mining or went into education and ministry and that kind of thing. And that is now, because that college has been closed down, is in danger of being lost again. So there are things that people are looking for over there that they need the support of. And I think when it was a dual conversation between me and them over, I get to do this, and it's very important in terms of for people and the landscape and what I'm doing, but it's also very important for them.
Any questions for Will Carey? I wanted to ask a question really about, this is celebrating 20 years of devolution. I suppose in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time, we'll all be sat here slightly older and coming back and doing something similar. I mean, but what do you think the role of the photographer is in helping to tell the story of Wales and even shape the story of Wales in the years ahead? Do you think, how do we make that contribution?
In my case, personally, it is sort of encouraging people to sort of come together and actually communicate, work together. It's encouraging them to sort of come out of their shell, to respond to things and be part of something. And you give a community something to be part of, it can only grow in a positive way. So in 10 years, hopefully, I'll have about 12 people from my village with cameras and all turning up, maybe they sat in the same place going, yeah, he taught me to pull a camera out and document it, or talk about how things are moving, and encouraging maybe to challenge their local politicians or councillors to change things in the community, set up different projects, and hopefully that it'll have that kind of effect.
Because it is interesting that people talk about photography as being one of the most democratic of art forms. I mean, how appropriate that we're sat here in the heart of democracy in Wales talking about photography. But it's quite interesting, I guess, the role not just of going out and documenting it, but of actually encouraging others to use photography to help tell their story and to make those connections to bring communities together.
I mean, I think also something I learnt with this project that I've done is that also photography can be an art form away from talking or away from words, in its inherent power in the image. And so, what I've discovered with mine is actually, I don't really need to say much around the work. I don't really want to say much around the work, I found. And that in a way that it's accessible in that way. And I think that's the beauty of photography. And I think the more sort of the more that we can move away from, I don't know, like division, I guess, and the more that people can access things in a different way, the more useful something like photography in that way might become. So I guess I'm talking about sort of subtlety and depth of an image. And it's been a very big surprise for me, someone who writes a lot, to find that power in a single image. And I think that then it makes me realize that, well, it does have an extreme artistic role, photography, and I'm really happy to have discovered that in my own work, and it will play a bigger part in my life, I'm sure, in the way I photograph people and places in Wales, for sure. Yeah.
The other thing that will certainly be very different in 10 years is obviously Wales is being documented all the time by non-professional photographers, relentlessly, consistently, right now. The way we all work is actually quite slow, and I think that is the difference. I think in 10 years there'll be maybe more curatorial, all this imagery is available, it's all being recorded, social media, video. You could just curate a photographic project of what's happening in Wales without leaving this building. The imagery is accessible, it's there. But what I see in the strength of doing something like this is, like I say, we work slow. We take a long time to produce a single image. Whereas, certainly, well, I do it as well, and kids, you're processing and consuming and taking pictures so quickly. It just comes zip, 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 and then they disappear. So the slowness is important, It's really.
I think you can sense that. I think in the images, you see that it's the investment of time.
Yeah.
In each of the projects, like you say, I mean, everyone here probably has a phone in their back pocket somewhere, and people are carrying these things around everywhere, and there are millions, if not billions and billions of photographs being captured all the time. Many of them never go further than the device that they've been captured on. But actually to do a project where there's a time investment in building those relationships with the community and getting to know them, I think you can really get that sense from the work. Any final questions? Oh, a question at the back here.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the technical process behind each of your projects. Digital, analog, etc. Especially the Farmers in the Moonlight. How is that done? If you're willing to reveal your secrets, all of you.
Well, I can tell you that it was slow. And the thing about shooting things at night, as any of you who photograph will know, is that when you're using long exposures, you have to wait a long time for the camera to process it. And at -10 on a hill, it gets a bit cold at night. So for mine, my background as a film cinematographer helped me learn very quickly the process for using my digital camera and Moonlight, which was that I had all the wrong equipment. So I had to invest in very fast lenses. That's lenses that have a very wide iris, and I had to make sure that I tested different shutter speeds to make sure that I had the right. I don't know how to say it, the right sort of sharpness of the image for the Moonlight. And then really, apart from kind of sort of artistic research, artistic testing, if you like, in terms of framing, really the issue for me was learning about the moon. So learning about, how the moon rises, how it changes during the month, how it changes during the year, the different times when I needed to sort of be available for the farmers, how to do it with the changing weather in Wales. It's a project that is kind of a year and a half, really, because you might, not every month there's going to be a clear night with the moon at the right time of day, evening, where it's not too late to keep the farmers up. And I'm not necessarily always there. I mean, I've tried to be based there, but I haven't always been there. And so it's just sort of managing Moonlight really was quite challenging. And I've sort of, wherever I've been in the world since I started this project, which is mainly England and Wales, but sort of mainly kind of Cardiff-based living and London and Mid Wales, I've kind of just looked at the moon most of the times I've seen it and had a kind of strange relationship with the moon. So I feel that I think that's, and I've got to know a lot of sort of astronomers in Wales who have helped me as well understand a bit more about the moon. So that's really sort of technically really just understanding the way in which the moon works, which has been really amazing. And I would never have thought I'd have done that or even gone anywhere close to that. So it's very exciting.
We have a resident moonlight expert. Any other technical challenges, or? I mean, Hugh, you range of media.
Mine's massive in terms of. I did approach things with a conventional sort of method to begin with, being a documentary photographer, but in the last sort of like 5 years, my practice has changed massively. So I adopt practically everything and involve that in my practice. So I might use mobile phone technology beyond the sort of SLR conventionally as photographers might use. I also use AR, VR, 3D, live streaming. I write, I'm trying to adopt every form of language that I can use to express. And it comes back really to these ideas that we can use visual communication beyond the means of writing, or it's so that it's inclusive. Everybody can use it. Everybody can tap into it one way or another, and they can be involved in it. So if I use live stream, or I use sort of Instagram to communicate, I'm looking for ways to pull you in. And not just to pull you in, I want your voice, I want you part of it, because that's the important thing. We can create a document ourselves, we can put our voice into it, we can say what we want to say, but I want the opportunity to go, excuse me, be part of this, and actually say something. You have the opportunity to do so. And I have the opportunity to do that with you, so I'm going to use it.
I mean, James, I'm aware your journey was on mountain bike from north to south. Did that limit?
Just a small digital black and white camera, and I guess about 10-15% of the pictures in the book were actually taken with my iPhone, and that just seems to be the way I work now. You know, there's certain shots you need a certain camera, but there's quite a lot of it. An iPhone's perfectly adequate. So, yeah. Dropped it occasionally, the usual things, but
Oh, you teenager!
Nothing challenging.
I suppose we shot on a mix of different cameras, just whatever suited whatever the shoot was we were doing. But for me, the exciting thing was going to the archives.
Yeah, that was a process in itself. Being able to sit down with somebody and have them go through their images with you, their wedding photographs or, their baby photographs, or especially for my Gramps, I was shown his oath of allegiance, and I was shown his passport, and these are all things I've never seen before. Mm-hmm. So it was really something that gave me the opportunity to connect to a past that I'd never really questioned. So.
And I think that going into the newspaper archives,
and
seeing what the response was to the refugees coming over at that time was fascinating.
Yeah, that was fascinating, wasn't it? 'Cause there was almost a divide in opinion between the Coal Board and the government at the time. The government wanted to welcome these people, these Hungarian refugees, to come and settle and to go down the mines, but the people that were in charge of the mining boards wouldn't want the Hungarians down there. So there was a little bit of tension there. Mm-hmm. But as we were going through the newspapers...
Following that through the years was interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Over a period of 6 months, you could see that they were like, these Hungarians are going to come here and take the jobs. What are our boys going to do? And then towards the end, we spoke to Kerry Thompson, who's the curator at Big Pit, and he spoke about the different people that were down the mines and how, in quite a lovingly way, it really wasn't it. He was saying how you'd it wasn't just you down the mines. There was like the Welsh boys, the Yugoslavians, the Polish, the Hungarians, the Jamaicans. But when you're down there, you're just the boys rather than, there's no division down there. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was really interesting finding that through the process.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Any final questions? Oh, there's a question here in the middle.
Hi there. Sticking with technology, in the age of social media, I'm curious how much social media you used or how much you avoided it in your projects.
Personally, it's everything for me. Like I said, it's collaboration. So, yeah, I use it to all ends, even promotion, and that's the killer. That's something I don't like personally, but it's another tool of getting that out there to get people in. I think you talk to most documentary or conventional photographers, I think everybody hates using it because it takes up so much of your time that you could be doing something else with. But there is a way of sort of using that to your advantage. That would be my take on social media. But I'm using it to sort of mess with things. Let's see what you can push and break, and let's bend this a bit and see where it goes. Right now, I just did this Instagram thing, which I think nearly broke me in the end, because I'm trying to blog with this thing. I'm trying to make people think differently, conceptually, and put things behind things and hide things, and make people question themselves or question their past or whatever. It's just an interesting tool that you can use, and in this day and age, it's brand new. Use it. Push it to all the limits and see what happens. And something will always come out of it. So that's my take on it.
I've had a love-hate relationship with social media for the last 6 or 7 years, partly because it's been a big part of my job outside of the photography. And I spent, up until about 3 weeks ago, which might have had something to do with this, I spent about the last 2 years off Facebook very deliberately. I have issues around, the corporate use of Facebook and everything else that's going on in the world, and how Instagram feeds into that, and WhatsApp and everything. So there are definite problems with social media at the moment beyond just feeling overwhelmed in our own daily lives and daily consumption of it. But one of the reasons I came back to Facebook was talking to all the people involved that I've been photographing and talking with. That was the primary platform that a lot of them were on, from 16, 17-year-olds to 90-year-olds. So if I want to be able to share this with them, if I want to be able to reach them, I've got to be on there. And I have been since this commission has been moving forward. And that use of it has actually been really rewarding for me. It's been great to see the connection with it. But yeah, the other thing is it's there. It's being used, and it will change, and it will evolve, and the horse is bolted. So if you use it, and it is part of the visual language now, all of it. So use it, don't use it, whatever's best for you.
I found out about the commission on Facebook through a group where somebody had just pulled together all the open calls, and I wouldn't have found out about it any other way. So I'm less rude about Facebook these days. And because it was the project was shot for me. The project wasn't part of a bigger project I was doing. It began and ended on the exact time frame of this. Basically, it was all produced in June, July, and August. So I thought, I should do some Instagram stories because there's a clear time frame to it. And I've got a lot of video on my phone of me where I'd set the phone on the top of the mountain or wherever I was cycling, and I cycle past. And then as soon as I'm out of shot, you see me running back to pick the phone up and turn the video off and put it back in my pocket. So, yes, I did use it, but I think that was partly because it was a public commission to engage as many people as possible. Like Hugh was saying, I think was more valid on this particular project. So, yeah, I am embracing it.
Excellent.
One thing I would say is that where I've been making my work in the Ellen and Clara valleys in Reddenshire, where I was staying was off-grid, so there was no mobile phone signal and no internet. And I've been there, for long periods over the last year. I mean, more there than here. And so that's been very interesting. it's like a forced digital detox when really you need to be engaging with people as well. So it's taught me a lot about my own personal habits on social media, and that's been, it's been really a revelation. But it's also taught me that it has a lot of power to connect to people I wouldn't have met through any other way. So these groups of astronomers, for example, who are very, very helpful to me in Wales, just connecting to them through Facebook. And also the farmers, just sort of connecting to them, even though that we're all in the same valley, 2 valleys. It's still a big area. And so I found a lot of the time I'd spend searching for hotspots, 3G, 4G, 2G hotspots.
Wouldn't
so,
you? Any G.
So, it has, I think it's really, trying to manage it is what the issue is really, I think, for everyone.
Fantastic. I'm aware we need to wrap up now. Apparently Charlotte Church is in here after us, so we need to bring things to an end. Can I say thank you to everyone for coming this morning? Can I say a particular thank you to the Senedd for allowing us to have this discussion right here. It's not always open for these sorts of events, so it's very, very special. But can I particularly thank Zilla, Hugh, James, Harry, Luce and Edward, and John as well, John Pountney, who's not able to be with us this morning, for your work. It's on show upstairs, and I'd invite you all, if you haven't had a chance to see it, to come upstairs afterwards. It will move on from here in November. It travels to the Aberystwyth Arts Centre between November and January, then on to Red House in Merthyr, I think end of January, February, and we'll finish up at the gallery in Caernarfon in May and June of next year. So it's great to see that this work is actually, because it comes from all over Wales, is actually, returning the favour and going back around Wales as well. Thank you all for coming this morning. Thank you to the artists, and if you're here for the rest of the festival as well, we hope you enjoy the GWLAD Festival. Thank you.